Hi guys, and welcome on Cheaters and Jerks. This channel is about real-life cheating stories and consequences.
My uncle's life seemed picture perfect from the outside. He had a beautiful wife, two adorable children, and a cozy suburban home that would make any family man proud. His wife, a dedicated stay-at-home mom, kept their house immaculate and their kids well-mannered. She was the epitome of a domestic goddess, always ready with a warm smile and a freshly baked pie. Uncle, on the other hand, was the breadwinner of the family. He poured his heart and soul into his business, working tirelessly to provide for his loved ones. Long hours at the office and frequent business trips were a small price to pay for the financial security and comfortable lifestyle he could offer his family. Despite the demands of his career, Uncle always made time for his children. He would come home exhausted but never too tired to play catch with his son or read bedtime stories to his little girl. The love he had for his family was evident in the way his eyes lit up whenever he spoke about them. To the outside world, Uncle and his wife were the perfect couple. They attended school events together, hosted backyard barbecues for the neighborhood, and always seemed to be in sync. Their marriage appeared solid, built on a foundation of love, trust, and mutual respect. However, behind closed doors, the cracks in their relationship were starting to show. Uncle's long hours at work meant he was often absent, leaving his wife to shoulder the responsibilities of parenting and household management alone. The strain of their different roles and the growing distance between them began to take a toll on their once happy marriage. Despite the challenges, Uncle remained committed to his family. He believed that with hard work and dedication, he could maintain the perfect life he had built. Little did he know that his world was about to be turned upside down, and the illusion of his idyllic existence was about to shatter. The death of Uncle's brother hit him like a freight train. The shock, the pain, the overwhelming sense of loss consumed him. In his time of need, he turned to the one person he thought would always be there for him, his wife. Uncle sought solace in her arms, desperate for comfort and support. He needed her to be his rock, his anchor in the storm of grief that threatened to drown him. But as he reached out to her, seeking the warmth and love he so desperately craved, he was met with a cold, distant response. His wife's hugs were brief and perfunctory, lacking the depth of emotion he needed. Her kisses were quick pecks, devoid of the passion and comfort he longed for. It was as if she was going through the motions, offering the bare minimum of support before quickly returning to her daily tasks. Uncle tried to understand, tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps this was just her way of coping with the loss. Maybe she needed to keep busy, to distract herself from the pain. But as the days turned into weeks, her detachment only grew more apparent. She would brush off his attempts to talk about his brother, changing the subject or finding an excuse to leave the room. When he broke down in tears, she would pat his back awkwardly, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Uncle felt more alone than ever. The one person he thought would be his lifeline, his partner in navigating this difficult time, seemed to be pulling away from him. The distance between them grew, a chasm of unspoken pain and unmet needs. He tried to rationalize her behavior, telling himself that everyone grieves differently. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. The woman he had married, the woman who had once been so loving and supportive, seemed like a stranger to him now. As Uncle struggled to come to terms with his brother's death, he also found himself grappling with the realization that his marriage was not the unshakable fortress he had once believed it to be. The cracks that had been slowly forming over the years were now impossible to ignore, and he wasn't sure if they could ever be repaired. As Uncle grappled with the loss of his brother and the growing distance in his marriage, a family friend started to become a more frequent presence in their lives. The friend, a man who had known Uncle and his wife for years, began dropping by their house more often, always accompanied by his young child. At first, Uncle didn't think much of it. He was too consumed by his...
Look at the mental gymnastics she's doing. She calls James her rock. He works his tail off to provide for her, yet she feels entitled to betray him because she is bored. This is classic lack of the character. She wants the security of the provider and the excitement of the player. She justifies it because this is just a slice of the happiness. She deserves it. Why she deserves it? deserves it for sitting on her ass, and this is too much for her anyway. While James is building empire, she is actively destroying it for some pleasure, dopamine hit. Remember, this is very important. If a woman calls your hard work monotony, she belongs to the street. She doesn't deserve you.
His grief to question the man's motives. In fact, he found some small comfort in the friend's visits. It was nice to have someone around who seemed to understand what he was going through, someone who was willing to listen to his stories about his brother and offer words of support. The friend's child, a playmate for Uncle's own kids, provided a welcome distraction. The sound of laughter and the patter of little feet running through the house brought a glimmer of light into the darkness that had settled over Uncle's life. But as the weeks passed, Uncle began to notice some odd things about the friend's visits. For one, he always seemed to come by during the day, when Uncle was at work. He would stay for hours, long after the children had grown tired of playing together. Uncle tried to brush off his unease, telling himself that the friend was just being supportive. After all, his wife was home during the day, and perhaps she needed the company too. But there was something about the way the friend looked at his wife, the way their eyes would linger on each other just a bit too long, that made Uncle's stomach twist. He wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but he hesitated. His grief had left him feeling uncertain, questioning his own perceptions. Maybe he was just being paranoid, seeing things that weren't really there. And so Uncle said nothing, even as the friend's visits grew more frequent and the odd behavior continued. He buried himself deeper in his work, staying late at the office to avoid coming home to a house that no longer felt like the sanctuary it once had been. But the nagging sense that something was wrong never left him. It gnawed at him, a constant presence in the back of his mind, even as he tried to focus on rebuilding his life and being there for his children. Little did Uncle know that his suspicions were not unfounded, that the family friend's visits were not entirely innocent, and that the cracks in his marriage were about to widen into an irreparable chasm. The truth, when it finally came to light, would shatter the fragile illusion of normalcy he had been clinging to, leaving him to pick up the pieces of a life he no longer recognized. Uncle leaned against the kitchen counter, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. The kids were playing in the living room, their laughter a faint but cruel reminder of the innocence he longed to preserve. He tried to focus on his work, on the spreadsheets and emails waiting for his attention, but his mind refused to cooperate. It was stuck replaying the small moments that had been gnawing at him for weeks now. His reverie was broken by the sound of tiny footsteps. His younger son, clutching a piece of paper, approached him with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. "Dad, I made this drawing," he said, holding out the paper with pride. Uncle smiled, taking the paper from his son's hand. "Let's see, buddy." But the smile froze on his face as he glanced at the crude illustration. It was unmistakably his wife and the family friend, standing close together, while stick figures of the children sat alone in the hallway. "They play this private game when we're outside," his son explained, his voice tinged with confusion. Uncle's brain screamed to comprehend, to rationalize, but the dam of denial broke. The coffee cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the tiled floor, its contents splattering everywhere. He didn't react to the mess. His entire focus remained glued to the drawing and his son's innocent face. "It's their secret game," his son added, eyes wide with naivete. Each word was a dagger to Uncle's ribs. He felt the walls closing in, a crushing weight that suffocated him. Uncle's hand shook as he fished his phone from his pocket, swiped it open, and pressed the record button. His breath came in short bursts. "Kiddo," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "can you tell me more about this game? When do they play it?" His son nodded, his expression serious. "Usually when me and my brother are playing outside, Mommy and Uncle Sam go to her room. They lock the door. Sometimes the living room, too. We can't go inside until they finish." A chill ran through Uncle's veins, his mind racing to form coherent thoughts. "How often?" he managed to ask. "Lots of times," the boy replied innocently. "Almost every weekend. Sometimes during the week, too, when you are at work." Uncle's stomach turned, bile rising in his throat. "And where do you go when they play? We just sit in the hallway, his son whispered, eyes darting to the doorway like he was sharing a secret. We knock, but they don't answer. An icy grip tightened around Uncle's heart. They don't answer? The boy shook his head. No, we just have to wait. My brother says we have to be quiet. Uncle clenched his jaw, fighting to keep his composure. What about your little sister? He asked. Where is she during these games? She turns the TV up really loud so she doesn't get scared, his son said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. She puts on cartoons and sings along. A wave of nausea hit Uncle as he tried to process the neglect wrapped around these horrific revelations. Do you tell anyone else about this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. No, Daddy, it's a secret game, the boy replied, his voice full of the naive trust a child places in their parents. Uncle swallowed hard, the enormity of the betrayal weighing down on him like an anchor. The room seemed to spin, the walls of his home, once filled with love and laughter, now tainted by lies. He pressed stop on the recording, his thumb trembling against the phone screen. Every detail recounted by his son was another brick smashed through the facade of his married life. Thank you for telling me, he said softly, pulling his son in for a hug. The boy hugged him back, his little arms wrapping around Uncle's neck as if assuring him of their bond. Uncle closed his eyes, trying to soak in the purity of that embrace, knowing that the days of protecting his children from this painful truth were now nothing but a distant memory. When my uncle confronted her, she didn't deny it. Instead, she had the nerve to blame him, saying he wasn't fulfilling her needs, and she had every right to find satisfaction elsewhere. Her gall was mind-blowing. Uncle stood there in the dimly lit living room, his fists clenched at his sides, staring at her with a mix of disbelief and anger. The words, "I have every right," echoed in his ears, twisting his gut into knots. I wasn't there for you? His voice was low, teetering on the edge of fury. While I was working myself into the ground to give this family a good life, you were... And what about me? She cut him off, her face twisted in a scornful sneer. Do you even know what that's like? To feel neglected? To be invisible in your own home? Invisible? Uncle felt a surge of heat rush to his face. Is that your excuse, Alice? To betray your family like this? She crossed her arms, unfazed. You don't get it. You never understood. This marriage has been dead for years, and you're too blind to see it. Blind? He took a step closer, his eyes boring into hers. I've been nothing but loyal. I've sacrificed everything for you and the kids, and this is how you repay me? Alice rolled her eyes, the disdain apparent. Loyal. Right. Tell that to someone who cares. Uncle's jaw tightened. The room felt smaller, air heavy with tension and unspoken resentment. He took a deep breath, fighting to keep his voice steady. This isn't just about us, he said, his tone softer, more controlled. What about the kids? Do you think they don't know? They've seen you, Alice. They know everything. Her expression faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of something, guilt maybe, crossing her face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a hardened glare. They're resilient. They'll get over it. Uncle shook his head, incredulous. You really believe that, don't you? That they'll just get over it? They have no choice, she shrugged. People adapt. They'll move on. A silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Uncle's mind raced, torn between rage and despair. The woman standing before him, once the love of his life, was now a stranger draped in betrayal and cold indifference. You've left me no choice, he finally said, his voice barely more than a whisper. This ends now, Alice. We're done. Fine by me, she responded, her words sharp as a blade. Good luck playing the martyr. The divorce was inevitable. They navigated through the legal maze, now estranged partners dividing their lives and splitting the time with their children and the dog. The once vibrant family home turned into a battleground of scheduled pickups and drop-offs. The kids, innocent casualties of their parents' war, moved between houses with solemn faces. The family dog, Daisy, wagged her tail less frequently, sensing the tension whenever Uncle and Alice exchanged courteous nods at the curb. Alice wasted no time. She married the family friend Brad, whose suavity could have only been rivaled by his nerve. The affair left a bitter taste, yet Brad's defense of Alice's actions drove the sting deeper. He first saw Brad again at a school function. Huddled among the parents waiting for their children's performance, Uncle watched as Brad slipped his hand around Alice's waist, the touch now legitimized by a ring. Laughter bubbled from their corner, a distorted echo of happier times. "Hey man," Brad called out too loud, raising a hand in casual greeting. His voice carried across the room, drawing curious glances. "Long time no see." Uncle stiffened, his fingers curling into his palms. He forced his lips into a tight smile and approached, each step heavy with resolve. "Brad," he said coolly, nodding at Alice. "Nice to see you both." "Look," Brad started, dropping his voice as if revealing a conspiracy. "About everything that happened, man, you gotta understand. Alice. She just needed something you weren't giving her." Uncle's jaw clenched. A flicker of deepest exasperation flared in his eyes. But he kept his voice level, only a slight edge betraying his control. "And you thought you were the guy to give it to her?" Brad shrugged, offering an apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She was unhappy, man. Sometimes people grow apart. It's not about right or wrong." A small laugh escaped Uncle, a humorless sound. "No, it's always about right and wrong, Brad." Alice shifted, uncomfortable, her gaze bouncing between the two men. "Let's not do this here. It's the kids' night." Uncle nodded slowly, exhaling a breath he didn't realize he was holding. For the kids. But the stage had shifted.
James finally took the red pill. He made a mistake by offering her second chance. Remember, never give second chance for the cheater. Never negotiate with cheater. This ends all the time with the same way as you could see in this story. But one thing he did later good, he didn't just guess, he verified. He took the private investigator, took evidences, and when she tried to lie again, he cut the cord. No screaming, no drama, just consequences. She thought she can play with him all the time and have her affair partner on the side. But fortunately, James realized that he is the prize, not her. The moment she broke the ultimatum, she is evicted from his life.
Betrayal now public knowledge wrapped in the mundane act of small-town gossip. Neighbors and friends who once shared holiday dinners now whispered behind cupped hands as they passed Uncle on his morning jogs. Brad, ever confident, continued to act as if the affair was just a minor hiccup, asserting his rightful place beside Alice. His presence, a constant reminder of the life stolen, perpetuated Uncle's steely resolve. He poured himself into work, each deal, each contract, a way to channel the seething injustice that boiled beneath the surface. The victory in court, winning half the custody and ensuring the kids spent weekends and holidays with him, gave moments of solace. To the children, he remained their rock. To the world, a successful businessman. But inside, revenge threaded subtly through his goals. He would ensure his children knew the truth, and as their bond deepened, it became an unspoken testament to the values he upheld. And as Alice and Brad flaunted their new life, Uncle stood firm, the quiet strength of a man wronged, yet undeterred. Uncle's phone buzzed again, another text from Alice lingering like a bad song stuck on repeat. He glanced at the screen. "I miss you. Maybe the kids can sleep over your place more. It's been hard without you." He rolled his eyes, thumb hovered over the screen, torn between responding and throwing the phone across the room. Each message felt calculated, Alice's attempts to tug at the strings she once played so well. He could almost hear her rehearsed sighs and see her doe-eyed pleas. He knew his ex-wife too well. The sudden bursts of nostalgia were suspect. His fingers tapped out. "We'll talk later." He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and stared at the ceiling, thoughts swirling like a storm. Alice missed him? No. She missed control. Her hands may have once held the threads, but they no longer puppeteered his movements. He could recognize a manipulative play when he saw one. She wanted more time with the kids? No, she wanted the semblance of normalcy, perhaps even sympathy from onlookers. Her life with Brad was missing something only Uncle could fix or provide. The next time they met for a kid exchange, he mirrored her usual politeness, an easygoing facade tightly in place. Daisy hopped into the car, the dog's tail a metronome of perpetual motion. The children chatted about their weekend plans, the mundane blending seamlessly with the subtext of their parents' tension. So, Kendra's got a soccer match next weekend, Alice started, her voice tinged with the warmth of friendly co-parenting. Maybe she should stay over after practice. For consistency? Uncle pretended to mull it over, scratching Daisy behind her ears. That sounds reasonable. His voice held a careful neutrality. Alice smiled, almost relieved by his agreement. Great. And James has that school project. I could really use your help getting him sorted. Maybe he can spend an extra night or two this week? Of course, Uncle nodded, maintaining eye contact. Whatever's best for the kids. The brief smile she shot him had layers, too many for anyone but Uncle to unravel. Gratitude mixed with satisfaction. He played the part, taking her cues, knowing he could navigate this better than she anticipated. Over the next weeks, her texts grew frequent, blending casual updates with nostalgic undertones. Each time, Uncle responded minimally, just enough to seem cooperative without revealing his hand. When Alice mentioned weekends, he agreed smoothly, gradually allowing her to believe she was aligning them back to some semblance of civility. But behind every agreement, each polite nod, Uncle plotted his own steps. The extra nights with the kids weren't burdens, they were opportunities. Their time together only solidified the unspoken bond they shared. If Alice thought she could reel him back in, use the children as leverage, she severely underestimated him. By orchestrating their schedule to overlap more, in essence, she handed him more than time. She gave him trust, one he was determined to prove unworthy of her custody ambitions. Uncle led her on, making her believe he was interested. Each time Alice pried with her suggestive messages, a small smile curled on his lips. He played his role to perfection, thoughtful, slightly intrigued, but always just out of emotional reach. The first suggestive text came on a lazy Tuesday evening. Alice must have felt particularly bold, sending a photo meant to provoke a reaction. He saved it instantly, archiving it in a hidden folder on his phone. His response was tactful, understated, a simple, beautiful. She took the bait. Over the next days, messages became more frequent, more intense. Each ping from her felt like a victory. She volleyed videos next, tearful, desperate confessions of love and regret, as if trying to paint herself in softer hues. Her voice carried through the small speakers as if it belonged to a past life, one he had already buried. The collection grew, each piece a fragment, carefully stored, waiting. Underneath his composed exterior lay a meticulous planner, each move calculated with precision. He knew the power these pieces held, and he waited for the right moment to strike. The kids played in the living room, their laughter a muffled background to his silent plotting. He watched them, a warm glow in his otherwise cold eyes. They deserved better than the half-truths Alice peddled, and he would ensure they got it. The next Friday, Alice dropped off the kids with that familiar smile, layered with too much intention. As they chatted about schedules and mundane parental duties, she leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. You know, I've missed our nights together, she said, lips almost grazing his ear. Uncle nodded, face blank but eyes taking mental notes. I know, Alice, it's been hard. He pulled away slightly, maintaining that practiced neutrality. Her desperation smelled like victory. Later in the quiet of his study, he reviewed her latest submission. It was a video of her tear-streaked face pleading silently, confessing faults, asking for forgiveness, promising changes that rang hollow. Alice's attempts to reel him back were almost pitiful now. Uncle recognized the undercurrents of her despair. Brad's hold on her life must be tightening, leaving no room for the chaotic freedom she once reveled in. She saw Uncle as a lifeline, a chance to reclaim ground lost. Meanwhile, Uncle crafted responses carefully, just enough to keep her hooked, never too much to tip his hand. He was playing a dangerous game, one where the stakes were the very future of his children. He typed a brief message. I miss you too, Alice. We'll figure this out. It was clean, devoid of the raw emotion she sought.
This is the reality check every disloyal woman fears but never expects. She thought she was upgrading, but she was just being used. David told her the truth about her whale. She was distraction, a toy. Guys like David know that a woman who cheats isn't the wife material. She is just for fun. She traded a king who would have died for her for the simple joker who wouldn't even let her inside his house. She destroyed her legacy for a few minutes, a few hours, we don't know, of feeling, of being alive. And now she is standing in the cold. Zero sympathy for this trash.
But enough to keep her strings taut. With a final glance at the saved collection, he knew he held the cards to dismantle her facade. Above all, Uncle knew time was on his side. The perfect moment would come, and with it, her entire world would unravel in a way she could never foresee. Alice thought she had him. She truly believed her nightly confessions and suggestive photos had succeeded in weakening Uncle's resolve. Every message she sent, every whisper of longing implanted during their brief exchanges, only deepened her conviction. She imagined the life they could rebuild together, far removed from her current husband, Brad. That sense of satisfaction, however, was nothing more than an elaborate illusion. Uncle watched each desperate attempt with the precision of a hawk. He bided his time, collected every morsel of evidence, and waited for the moment it would deliver the maximum blow. The sting would be particularly harsh, given that Brad and Alice were striving to expand their family, a pursuit Alice had painted with hues of hope and fresh starts. This context made the timing perfect, the betrayal all the more piercing. Once he had gathered sufficient proof, Uncle embarked on the final phase of his carefully laid plan. Each image, video, and message was meticulously curated into a damning dossier. He transferred this incriminating trove into an email, his fingers hovering briefly over the keyboard as he reviewed his handiwork. With a subject line as cold as his intent, "For your eyes only," he sent the email to Brad. The click of the mouse felt like the closing of a heavy door, final and resolute. That evening, as Alice obliviously resumed her nightly routine, another scene unfolded. Brad's phone buzzed with an incoming email, a digital harbinger of heartbreak. He opened the email, eyes narrowing as the contents unfurled. The images, the videos, the intimate confessions, they all painted a picture far removed from the woman he thought he knew. Each piece of evidence sliced through his trust, unraveling the life they were building brick by painful brick. In their quiet home, Alice continued with her newfound hope, unaware that Brad's face now mirrored a landscape of devastation. The clock ticked, moments stretched thin as he absorbed the enormity of her betrayal. Back in his own house, Uncle stood by the window, the warm glow of his children's laughter enveloping the space behind him. Victory coursed through him, not in an emotional release, but a cold, calculated satisfaction. He had played the long game and won. Brad had once stood tall, his chest puffed with arrogance, as he defended Alice against anyone who dared cast a shadow on her honor. The righteous knight in shining armor who had, ironically, now become the fool in a brutal chapter of betrayal. The irony didn't escape him. It clawed at his insides, mingling with the ache of betrayal. He paced the living room, the damning dossier still open on his phone, each image and video burning into his memory. His mind raced, each thought a shattered fragment of what had once been a coherent life. Alice's whispers of love, her sly smiles, the way she looked at him through half-lidded eyes. Had any of it been real? The night stretched on, static silence hanging in the air. Alice, oblivious, continued her routine. The very actions that had, until an hour ago, been signs of stability and normalcy. Now they were a mockery. Brad's jaw tightened, his grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. Alice. His voice was barely more than a whisper, yet it carried the weight of devastation. She turned, noticing the change in his tone, his demeanor. "What's wrong?" He threw the phone onto the couch, its screen glowing with evidence. "Explain this." Her eyes widened, a fleeting moment of panic crossing her face before she masked it with defiance. "Where did you get that? You sent this to him?" His voice cracked, the words laden with incredulity. Every word, Every image. Was it all a game to you? The room fell into a stifling silence. Alice couldn't meet his gaze, the bravado she had always carried crumbling at the edges. Brad sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The weight of the realization settled on his shoulders. This was the end. There was no salvaging what had been so thoroughly desecrated. The following days were a blur, a whirlwind of cold conversations and formalities. Divorce papers, meetings with lawyers, discussions about custody. The motion seemed more mechanical than human. Brad moved through it all like a ghost, the remnants of his once confident self dissolving in the aftermath. Alice fared no better. Her attempts at salvaging pieces of her shattered life were met with harsh reality. The prenup Brad had insisted upon left her grasping at straws. No money, no house, and her future with the kids hanging precariously in a balance she had no control over. Her once smug demeanor, the confidence that had been her armor, was shattered, leaving her vulnerable in the harsh light of consequence. In the end, the lavish life Alice had envisioned crumbled to dust around her. The echoes of her own actions reverberated in the emptiness of her now barren world. Brad, the husband she had betrayed, was gone, and she was left with nothing but the cold reminder of the choices that had brought her here. Days turned into weeks, and each one dragged on like an endless passage through purgatory for Alice. She could barely recognize herself in the mirror. Her once impeccable appearance gave way to haggard eyes and unkempt hair. Everything she had built her identity around, her marriage, her home, her status, had been stripped away. In stark contrast, my uncle's demeanor had taken on a fortified resolve. Each court hearing was grueling, each revelation cutting deeper into the putrid flesh of broken promises and deceit. But victory tasted sweet when the judge declared full custody in his favor. The courthouse was a sterile battleground, its pale walls echoing the finality of the gavel's thud. My uncle stood tall, the epitome of resilience, even when faced with the discomfort of his children's questions. They didn't understand why their mother wasn't coming home with them, why their life was changing so dramatically. But he had prepared himself for this moment, building a mental fortress to shield his emotions, ensuring his children would see strength and stability. Outside the courtroom, Brad lingered. His presence, a role reversal, was no longer one of arrogance, but of humility. He approached my uncle, eyes downcast, carrying the weight of his involvement in the very affair that had shattered a family. I had to help. I couldn't watch her destroy another life. Brad's voice was gruff, laced with regret and a faint, flickering apology. Thanks, my uncle responded, curt but sincere. He nodded, a silent truce forming between two men who had both been deceived by the same woman. Brad's testimony had been crucial, each word unraveling the tapestry of deceit that Alice had woven. It was clear, concise, damning. The courtroom had left no doubt about the extent of her betrayal. His words painted a vivid picture of Alice's treachery, leaving the judge with no choice but to award full custody to my uncle. Alice watched from a distance, her face a mask of bitterness and desperation. The reality of her situation dug deeper with every step she took outside the courthouse, with no place to call her own. Her belongings stuffed into cheap luggage, she had no taste of the life she once glorified. The children clung to my uncle, their innocence a stark contrast to the turmoil surrounding them. He acknowledged Brad one last time before leaving, a silent nod of understanding. Brad responded in kind, a man now grasping for redemption in the aftermath of his own misjudgments. And then they were gone, my uncle and the kids, the family dog bounding ahead, leading them to the car. The kids chattered among themselves, the harsh reality still a distant murmur in their young minds. For my uncle, it was a victory hard-earned, a step toward rebuilding his world, protecting his children's future. Alice stood there, a somber figure against the courthouse steps, watching the life she had obliterated disappear into the cityscape. Her world was now a barren wasteland, the echoes of her choices resonated.
Look at this. This is final lesson for us. James is rewired and happy. He leveled up because he cut the canker out of his life. He focused on his mission, stayed on his grind, and found a woman who actually respects him. Meanwhile, Clara is washing dishes in the dinner watching her off life from the outside. She calls it learning, I call it justice. Loyalty is the most expensive currency on the earth. Once you spend it cheap, you can never buy it back. Don't be a James in the beginning. Be the James from the end. Walk away, keep your frame, and let the trash takes itself out.